Let's just dive right in, shall we? Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going way beyond those surface-level sleep hacks you see everywhere. Instead, we are reasoning from first principles. We're going to break down the exact biological machinery of sleep, literally looking at how your nervous system regulates recovery and exactly how you can mechanically optimize the whole shebang.
So we're starting off with this massive paradox that honestly defines our modern era. We are absolutely exhausted, yet we literally cannot sleep. Crazy, right? Well, this perfectly illustrates this bidirectional loop between metabolic stress and sleep disruption. See, when we're chronically stressed, our central nervous system basically gets stuck in hypervigilance mode, and that completely shatters our sleep architecture. And then, because our sleep is shattered, our metabolic stress skyrockets even further. It's a vicious cycle. To break it, we really have to look under the hood.
To truly understand what's happening, we have to zoom all the way into the molecular level. Specifically, we need to look at how your cells actually track energy use. Now, every single time your cells expend energy, they break down a molecule called ATP. And that breakdown, it leaves behind this little byproduct called adenosine. As adenosine builds up in the extracellular space, it acts almost like a direct biological receipt of exactly how much energy you've burned throughout the day. And it's this very accumulation that creates your physiological drive to finally go to sleep.
It's this cascading chemical reaction that biologically forces us to feel sleepy. It's not just willpower. As that adenosine builds up in your basal forebrain, it essentially hits two very specific biological switches. First, it activates your A1 receptors, which actively shut down the neurons that are keeping you awake. Concurrently, it triggers A2A receptors to stimulate the neurons that actually put you to sleep. That right there is your homeostatic sleep drive. You burn energy, you build up the chemical signal, and your body forces a recovery.
But here's the thing. Adenosine is really only half the equation. You could have a massive buildup of adenosine, right? But if you're actively being chased by a predator, you're definitely not going to fall asleep. So we have to counterbalance that homeostatic drive with the HPA axis, which is our body's central stress and arousal system. The interplay between your deep sleep drive and this stress system completely dictates whether you'll actually lose consciousness and recover or just lie there staring at the ceiling for hours.
And this is exactly why exercise is a literal pharmacological-grade intervention. It doesn't just tire you out, it fundamentally rewires your brain's stress architecture. Physical training ramps up the synthesis of GABA, which is this incredibly calming neurotransmitter, and builds a biochemical shield right around the stress centers of your hypothalamus. It literally quiets your HPA axis down.
Let's pull back to the macro level for a second. It's absolutely fascinating how different modalities of physical loading differentially hijack these neurochemical pathways. Take aerobic training. It promotes deeper blood pressure dips at night and significantly reduces the time you spend awake after you initially fall asleep. But resistance training? That exerts a totally unique effect. It actually modulates molecular clock genes directly within your skeletal muscle, which powerfully improves your overall sleep duration. To put this into perspective, let's look at a landmark one-year clinical trial. One single number emerged from the data that was just mind-blowing: 3 minutes. That is the massive reduction in sleep latency achieved solely through resistance training. Participants lifting weights were falling asleep 3 minutes faster on average. And get this, that's a benefit the aerobic group simply did not see at all.
If you're a poor sleeper, the contrast between these exercise types is absolutely critical. Just think about sleep efficiency, the actual percentage of time you spend asleep while lying in bed. The resistance training group saw a highly significant increase here. Why? Because resistance training exerts unique biological mechanisms, like altering energy expenditure and relieving musculoskeletal pain, which makes it uniquely superior for maximizing how efficiently you sleep.
Now, we really can't discuss exercise without diving into chronobiology. Your body operates on this incredibly precise master clock, anchored by your dim light melatonin onset, or DLMO. The exact time you train relative to that natural melatonin release completely dictates your internal rhythm. Morning exercise induces a phase advance, basically shifting your clock earlier. But interestingly enough, evening exercise produces almost no average circadian shift for normal chronotypes.
We've all heard the warning, right? Evening workouts will ruin your sleep. But when you actually look at the complexity of the data, it tells a slightly different story. Systematic reviews do reveal that acute, high-intensity evening exercise slightly decreases REM sleep by about 1.95%. However, if you finish that workout more than 2 hours before bed, the disruption to your overall sleep duration and efficiency is incredibly minimal. Just remember this golden rule. The catabolic activity during wakefulness is what actually feeds the anabolic recovery during your sleep.
But hey, if you absolutely must train in that super sensitive 4-hour window right before bed, the data points to one very clear solution. You've got to dial back the intensity. Moderate intensity reduces those frustrating nighttime awakenings by 2.5 minutes, while low intensity, like a brisk walk, actually cuts down the time it takes to fall asleep. Avoiding high intensity late at night is what prevents those prolonged sympathetic nervous system spikes that keep you tossing and turning.
You do have to be really careful with the dosage, though. More is definitely not always better here. Pushing past healthy adaptation and falling into overtraining syndrome literally breaks your HPA axis. When you reach that state of sympathetic nervous system exhaustion, your resting hormone levels entirely crash. We're talking testosterone, DHEA, and ironically, even your waking cortisol. This state pretty much guarantees unrefreshing sleep, severe fatigue, and an inability to adapt. It is essentially a total systemic failure. And of course, the consequences of poor sleep go way, way beyond just feeling tired the next day. When you don't sleep optimally, you critically misalign the hypothalamic control of your cellular metabolism and energy expenditure. Think of sleep as the master reset switch for your appetite hormones. It balances ghrelin, which is the hormone that makes you hungry, with leptin, the one that signals you're full. Deprive yourself of sleep, and you are chemically hardwiring your brain to crave calories and store fat.
So how do we actually fix these severe sleep issues? We'll get a load of this massive effect size of 1.48. This comes from a truly remarkable clinical trial on patients suffering from both sleep apnea and chronic insomnia. The researchers found that combining cognitive behavioral therapy with exercise was exponentially more powerful than just doing exercise alone. It perfectly proves that when you marry psychological tools with physiological action, you yield serious clinical-grade results.
Now, for those of you whose nervous systems feel like they are constantly stuck in overdrive, engaging the vagus nerve through mind-body work provides a direct mechanical override. Practices that combine abdominal breathing and mindful movement directly enhance your vagal nerve's control over your heart. This practically halts the excessive circadian secretion of cortisol and improves a synthesis of that calming GABA neurotransmitter we talked about earlier. It acts as a literal physiological brake pedal for stress.
Okay, let's synthesize all of this molecular, endocrinological, and physiological data into a highly structured, clinical-grade protocol so you can optimize your own sleep architecture tonight. First up, you need to anchor your master clock with a strict, non-negotiable sleep schedule. Secondly, protect your natural melatonin and adenosine release by cutting out bright screens 30 to 60 minutes before bed. Third, if you're training, consider getting about 40 grams of protein in before bed to maximize your overnight muscle repair. And finally, utilize light evening walks to clear out blood glucose without spiking those stress hormones.
I want to leave you with a final thought to really challenge how you interact with your own biology moving forward. Knowing how exquisitely sensitive your neurochemistry is to movement and light, ask yourself, are you actively regulating your nervous system, or is your modern environment regulating it for you? Your sleep architecture is a highly tunable machine, and it's constantly responding to light, movement, and stress. The tools to regulate your HPA axis and your adenosynergetic system are quite literally in your hands. So take control of the inputs and optimize your recovery. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.